demand side management, where we're talking about not just shutting down people when you need to adjust demand to the grid, but also influencing user behavior, either by shifting their appliances to battery or by giving them incentives to do so. Virtual power plants, where we are more interested in sort of the incentives to give to different members of the virtual power plant to come together and to produce or consume, depending on the kind of virtual power plant. Energy prosumers, so individual actors in the grid represented by the software agent, maybe trading energy. So maybe they're producing some energy, want to send, export that to the grid, and they're able to do that in real time, just as you do on the stock market. Electric vehicle management, not just, so we are not less interested in the technology, but more interested in sort of the management systems for large fleets of vehicles. So when these vehicles plug into the grid in a neighborhood, how do you ensure that they don't blow up the local transformer? How do you schedule them? And how do you incentivize them to schedule at different times? And finally, self-healing networks. So if you have large numbers of prosumers in your network, and they're all producing energy, on a distribution net, in your distribution network, and normally you're allowing flow of electricity in one direction. Now you're getting flow of electricity from all sorts of nodes in the reverse direction. How do you correct for faults? How do you identify? How do you control the different nodes to make sure that your network is stable at all times? And that is balanced in demand and supply. So in what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to focus on demand side management, virtual power plants and energy prosumers. So kind of issues, incentive issues, and control issues that arise in these systems from an AI perspective. And I'm going to combine two of these specific areas into the notion of energy cooperatives. So how can we manage sort of collectives of energy prosumers coming together to either produce or consume energy? So let's start with the first one. Demand side management is often talked about in terms of pricing. Okay. So try and influence people's behavior by pricing them at the right times. So that you can shave peaks on the network. You can get them to avoid overloading the network when you're short of supply. And different strategies, pricing strategies have been tried. So you have the normal strategy is to have a standard tariff that prices you more as you consume more. And that's not real time. And then you have time of use tariffs that charge you more at peak time than at off-peak time. So if you have most of the consumers consuming at 7 p.m., you want to increase the price at those times to get people to not consume. And then you have the new novel idea, also the novel idea of real-time pricing. So if you allow prices to be set for specific slots of the day, so 15-minute time, 15-minute slots of the day, then you'll be able to control demand better, to fine-tune demand and supply. But real-time pricing on its own is a bad thing. It reduces what we call the natural diversity of demand. So what I'm showing you here is a graph where the result of a simulation with poles shifting to the cheapest times of the day. So we predict the cheapest time of the day for the next day, and we try to shift that out. So typically what you find is that you have three tariffs here. One's a fixed price tariff, so what you see this graph here that goes like this. You have a peak in the evening and a peak in the morning. So that's just looking at demand. So people wake up, they consume energy, they go to work, they consume again, and they again come back home and consume energy at night. So you have two peaks. That's what we deal with right now. Now there's the other tariff, which is the time of use tariff, which has an off-peak tariff for the evening, so from 11 to 7 in the morning. And then you have a peak time tariff, so you pay maybe 5 times more at peak time. And what you find is that typically what people do, they will schedule their appliances to turn on as soon as the price gets cheaper. So you end up with a really high peak as soon as the new price kicks in. And they run all their washing machines, hot water storage, etc., around 11 at night, and you get a much higher peak than what you would get with the standard tariff, which messes up the whole, this is the whole point of trying to control demand. Now, if you try real-time pricing, this is the kind of peaks you might get. So you get these peaks at these times. So, randomly across the day. Right? People will say, oh yeah, it's going to be cheaper there, I'm going to try to go there, and you get these peaks. And the crucial thing here is that it becomes unpredictable. While with standard tariffs, you're guaranteed sort of peaks in the evening and in the morning. Now you're getting peaks at any time of the day and you don't know when they're going to happen. Because people are predicting that the price is going to change the next day in some way. So the basic question here is, how do we get demand full supply? Because these problems will get exacerbated when you have renewable energy, when the supply is varying across every day. It's not just predictable because you have a coal power station that cannot shut down and you get price hikes because of that. You get price hikes because of renewable being more predominant during that day. So how do you get demand full supply to avoid these big peaks, to actually get the best use of renewable energy or the cheapest resources you have on the grid? One idea would be to automatically shift appliances. So make your appliances intelligent and get them to shift to cheapest time. Or use batteries. So store at the times of the day when you have cheap energy and use it at peak times so that you shave those big peaks. The third one would be influencing consumer behavior. So getting people to understand when the demand on the grid or where supply on the grid is low, and therefore you should avoid consuming more generous times. And these are not new ideas. Okay? You might think that we are lots of inventing lots of new things here, but lots of these ideas came about back in the late 1970s when Fred Schwab, professor at MIT, talked about the idea of homeostatic control for the energy grid. And he talked about the concept of an agent managing your energy consumption. So he was a power systems engineer looking at the system as an AI person, really, looking at how an autonomous agent could be looking at the price on the grid and controlling the demand, adjusting the storage in the home and controlling your hot water storage. So quite old ideas, but he also acknowledged that his ideas were not well tested. He didn't have the tools at the time, mathematical tools or the simulation tools to test this, and he acknowledged that. And basically the fear was that if you gave people a smart agent to control your appliances, to control your heating, to control your dishwasher, and your dishwasher was meant to run, say, at peak time, and your heating profile, your electric heat in this case, would turn on at those times to keep your temperature in the home at a certain level. And then the agent looked at the price profile and then tried to shift those around. So we look at shifting the minimum possible. So look at maybe minimizing your discomfort. Maybe not shifting your dishwasher to 11 at night when it's going to be noisy. Trying to minimize those comfort costs as well as your monetary costs. You get shifts like this. So you try and minimize the comfort cost by reducing the temperature by just 1 degree and getting a cheaper price. However, everyone will shift the minimum price again, and therefore you get higher peaks and you get higher prices, because if you create peaks in the network, you have to buy more generation, more reactive generation, and therefore your prices go up. So the solution we proposed was to use the predicted price as a control signal. So every home will get a prediction of the price for the next day, or they will be able to get a set price for the next day. But each agent would react differently to prices. So they learn to shift the appliances to a certain degree. So they learn to find where the market will converge to find an actual equilibrium of this market, so that the prices are flat. They do so by moving, shifting the appliances, so the appliances that they control in the home, to the cheapest times of the day, but by a certain distance. They don't go to the cheapest, they go slightly before that. So you add some noise to that shift. And also, they don't always optimize the heating profile. They optimize it with a certain capability. And by doing that, we're able to show that it results in flattening of peaks and it results in flattening of price profiles as a result. So these are detailed in these two papers. So this paper talks about the shifting of appliances, and we have another version which looks at using storage to do the same thing. And there where we show actually that we have a game, we analyze this as a game, and we're able to show that this strategy of learning to shift and learning to optimize the storage in this case will help you converge to the actual national equilibrium with more small margin. So there's actual theoretical proof that backs up the empirical results. So just to exemplify what happens, so you have these homes, so each line here is a home, this is the time of day. And these are appliances, the different appliances, there's a high frequency load, which is in blue, red, different load that is in red, and the blue box will indicate where the original on time was. And what you see is that as the agents optimize when these appliances should be run, you see them moving around. So you see the blue dots moving around. So each of these lines are cones. So you see these blue dots shifting, balancing out, adjusting their distribution in order to fit the price profile, to flatten the price profile. So this is not moving. Yeah. So they move gradually to distribute over the entire day as the day goes on. So every time you see them shifting, it's for the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And what you see on this graph is so these are the number of days, number of generations. So every day you see an improvement in maybe sometimes you find that they made a mistake and they readjust. But each home is only using the price signal to adjust the price. Not talking to any of the other agents. It's making its own decisions locally to adjust this price profile. And by doing that, they converge to a point where what we call the load factor and the diversity factor are much higher than before. And also the market price is flattened out. So what you see here, the green line is the initial market price, and the red line is the price, the current market price. So over time, they will have spread out. So what you can see here, all the loads have spread out over time. There are limitations to this approach. Domestic consumption only accounts for 36% of this decay consumption. Only 20% of consumption in the home is shiftable. So you can't shift your TV. You want to watch your TV at 7 p.m. your favorite show. Maybe you can start recording things now, but still you need to run something to record it. But only 20%, like washing machines, so 20% would be white goods. Washing machine, dishwasher, tumble dryer. So this is limited. Then you can try and use batteries. Batteries are an infinitely shiftable appliance, and they can take into account all your appliances. So you can store the energy that your appliances need and shift that around and power your appliances from it. However, batteries are considered near efficient in this case and are considered to be rapidly dischargeable or chargeable in the simulations. But this is not actually the case in reality. But you can foresee that in the future it will be feasible to use batteries to do this kind of shifting. Also, we think, in these simulations, when we started, we thought, comfort cost, we can make it a linear function and say, as you shift things more in the evening, it's more uncomfortable for you. If you reduce the temperature by, say, 2 degrees, maybe that's less comfortable for you, significantly less comfortable than 1 degree. It's not very clear, actually, how you measure comfort in a home. And also, we always assume that appliances are to be fully controllable with known run times. But actually, you can think of yourself, you can think of an agent being able to do that, but the human user will not let that happen. They will want to run things at certain times. They want to have control on these appliances and to be able to say, no, I don't want to run my washing machine at 7:30, I want to run it at 7 because that gives me time to go and do something else. Or that gives me time to come and pick up the clothes that have been washed, do something. People have got their own preferences for things, and it's not always possible to fully control things. And it's not always possible to know when these things need to be run. You change your behavior every day. You come to a conference, you're not doing your washing your clothes today, right? So how will an agent know when to run things if you're not wrong? You have very variable behaviors. So since that work, which was more about simulations and making lots of assumptions about human behavior, we've moved on to look at challenges around prediction, around feedback, around interactions with humans, and selections of types. So in this paper, for example, we looked at the problem of predicting when a user is going to use a certain appliance, focusing on white goods in particular. So in this case, say we're detecting when certain appliances have been run in the past. Say we're monitoring these appliances, like washing machines or dishwashers. We're able to construct a model, a probabilistic model of people's behaviors, and we can identify from some homes a very cyclic behavior. And we're able to say, next week, you're likely to run your washing machine, say at 12:30. in the afternoon. So we've shown with some research, so using some data sets that we generated using our own data collection system, and from the red data set which MIT provides, we're able to show very, very good results with that. So some homes are very, very predictable, and you can, now when you can predict when someone's going to use the appliance, you can tell them, look, I know you're going to use it at 12 today or at 5 today, why don't you shift it another 2 hours? If we can do that, then we stop annoying the user, telling them, shift to the cheapest time, shift to the cheapest time, or shift to that time when the reading is going to. You can adjust things according to the user. You can personalize the advice you give to the user. Now, to help with that, we also created this interactive feedback interface. So this is an interface that we built to allow users to visualize energy consumption, not just as an energy graph that you typically see. So this is an aggregate measure of energy consumption, but you can have it for an individual appliance as well. Now, if you can isolate the runs of these appliances from an aggregate energy measure, which you're getting from one of these cheap monitors, so we actually deploy these systems and get this data and show them to these users. And we let users annotate this graph. Then we can construct a different visualization of the energy consumption, a block-based one. And people find it much easier to understand this block-based representation. So in this, what you see here, each block represents an appliance run. So one of these tags here. And they're able to talk about, my washing machine uses that much compared to my TV which uses that much. They don't need to use kilowatt hours. They don't need to use numbers. They can use something very visual, very, very pragmatic. And that makes a big difference in how people understand energy consumption and therefore how they should adjust their behavior to reduce energy consumption. So they're able to better strategize about what appliances to reduce. Because people don't have a very clear understanding of what's power and what's energy. Kettle shoots up your energy monitor reading for 5 seconds or 1 minute. But that's not comparable to your shower, which is running for 30 minutes depending on the shower. We also looked at the problem of tariff switching. In the UK, we have a big problem with tariffs because tariffs are too complex. And when you're going to have real-time tariffs, it's going to be even harder. So how do you shift people to the right tariffs? And someone represented earlier this year on that. Okay, so that's about it with demand-side management. Only 5 minutes to talk about energy cooperatives. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we're doing in this area. So the kind of problem we're looking at are settings like this one in rural communities where recent initiatives have sought to provide micro-generating infrastructure. So people are going out, or governments are going out and giving to individual homes like this a solar panel or sort of small wind turbine maybe to charge the battery so that we can have light at night to read books, to study, or to do other activities. Now 1.4 billion people live without access to electricity, so if you're able to solve that problem, you're able to help lots of people get out of poverty. However, most of these initiatives look at just giving one home one PV panel, cheap PV panel. And that's what they can afford. They can't afford to set up a whole sort of generator outside the rural area and give them source panel. But most of them are just isolated, so they're just one PV panel, one battery, with no connections to the other houses. And what we looked at is a problem of trying to make these communities use their resources more efficiently. In this case, the resources are your battery, right? And the energy that each solar panel generates. So, can we, by getting them to work together, to use their batteries more efficiently so that they last a longer period of time, so that they don't have to charge and discharge the battery too much. So they keep that battery, they don't waste energy in conversion from charging to discharging. So how do we do that? And do that in a fair manner. So how do we manage consumers, communities of these kind of prosumers, where they have their own preferences to use energy, right? They want to use energy in the evening to different amounts. They all have their own generation constraints. So each one will have a different solar panel maybe. Or each one will have a different storage constraints, or different size of the battery. And some of them may not have the ability to get a mobile phone to do some micropayments on their mobile phone to sell the energy that they have. So how do you get them to exchange this energy? If you're able to connect them together, basically between these homes, how do you get them to share this in a fair way? So what we did was to model an individual home as a utility maximizing agent. And there are very interesting solutions you can come up with when you look at it from a microeconomic perspective. So you conceive of the home as a utility maximizing agent where the goal is to maximize your preference for energy at certain times of the day. So T is the time of the day, P is your preference for a certain amount of energy. So it's a value that is on this time. And H is the load that satisfies the preference. And you want to maximize the amount of the preferences that you're satisfying at every time. And then we transfer this model to a coalition model of the community. So when we connect them, we assume these homes can be connected up, and they can share energy between each other. Subject to the constraint that there's no change in utility. That is, they will get exactly the same satisfaction of their preferences if they were on their own, and that their battery usage will not increase. That is, you won't be putting more energy in their battery and discharging their battery, right? More than what they would do on their own. So basically, what's happening here is that you're connecting them up, and you formulate the objective such that you try to minimize the amount of battery charging, and that means sending over the energy from one home to another whenever you don't need it, so that you don't store it and lose the energy in that way. Or give the extra energy that you have to someone who needs it most of the time, and therefore avoid charging, and that person avoid charging his battery as well. So I won't go into details because I have 1 minute. So eventually what happens is that we can conceive of a fair distribution of these utilities using something called the Shapley value. So Lloyd Shapley is a famous economist, Nobel laureate last year or this year, who came up with the concept of the Shapley value. And in the Shapley value, what basically you come up with is a way of sharing the profits of collaboration equitably in a fair way. And in our model, we're able to come up with something called the charging Shapley value, that is determining the contribution of each home in the community based on the amount of charge it has reduced in the community, or the energy Shapley value, which is the Shapley value describes the contribution of the homes in terms of the amount of energy that has been saved as a result of the battery not being charged, or some home using the energy when it was available. So we're able to scale this to thousands of homes, simulated homes, and we also demonstrate it on data from real homes, and show that we would compute these solutions in seconds. So we could potentially allow communities of homes in rural communities to share energy and decide on the contribution that should get, the payoff that they should get for the amount contributed to the community individually. And if you want more details, this is the paper that my student wrote earlier this year at Amherst. So how should we operationalize it? Basically, we need to come up with a way of letting agents negotiate link flows, so deciding who gets the energy at which times of the day. Deal with real-time uncertainty, because this model is completely deterministic, so we will have a way of, in that model, to predict the energy consumption for the next day or the energy production for the next day, and therefore the model ignores those aspects and may decide on contributions that don't make sense in reality. There are more complex utility relationships, so we assume that there's a value for using energy at certain times of the day, but your preference for using energy at certain times of the day may not be quantified. It's very hard to put in number of preference is uncertain, human behavior is uncertain, and then once you can determine the contribution of every single agent using the concept of the Shapley value, how do you distribute them? Now, if you had a mobile payment mechanism, you could say, okay, this guy should get that much money for having reduced the loss in the network by X amount, so you pay him X dollars. But maybe you can use other more sort of social reward concepts, like social esteem, so you could give a prize, or you could give you could put up a dashboard and show this is the highest contributor in the community, and that's good enough. This is how it works in many contests, so maybe that should Also, you could give them a better app if they're helping the community more by sharing energy. So, to just summarize the sort of messages that I tried to put together, the messages that I sort of talked about earlier. A smart and a smart grid will only work if we first design the right mechanisms to involve the users. So you can't build some autonomous technology and hope it will just work by magic. You need to involve the users and do user studies, and we've done some of that. We've deployed our systems and seen how people react. And that's very important to understand the limitations of the system and to build the right interaction mechanism for autonomous agents and humans to work in energy systems. So I think since human behavior is so difficult to predict, you really need to ensure that they're educated, they understand, they have the right mental model of the autonomous system they're living with. You also need to take into account the emergent behaviors of collectives. So when talking about neighborhoods, these neighborhoods behave in certain ways, and if you give them incentives, certain types of incentives, then we might get very bad emergent behaviors. They might all converge to equilibrium that could be reasonable. So you want to study sort of the kind of equilibrium that arise in these neighborhoods based on the incentives pushing through. So that means modeling their preferences, modeling their behaviors and constraints, and running large-scale simulations. And finally, I talked about incentives already, but you need to manage the incentives of the key actors. So knowing what sort of incentives will matter to most of the actors in the system. Who can you control and who you can't control? Who do you need to pay and who you can just shut down? And because that might impact on what happens in the future based on deployment. If you want to find out more, we have two projects, the projects I mentioned earlier. These are most of the publications listed on the publication space, so you can find more about our work. And there are some demos as well, where you can see some of the simulations we've done and some of the demonstrations, so explanatory videos of what we've done in that space. So there's lots of work, not just from Southampton, but from Nottingham and Oxford University that have been done in the project that are very